All right, ladies and gentlemen, buckle up. This is going to be a fun conversation. Chris, welcome to the Better Well Show. It's been months trying to get you on. We finally connect. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time.
Yeah, Caleb, I'm fired up. Let's do this.
So I want to set the tone here. We connected, and I'm like, you're a big deal. I want you to share your story. I don't want to steal your thunder. We connect via Zoom. I don't know if you remember this, and you're like in your like Jeep or whatnot,
Convertible
like,
Bronco, yeah.
Bronco, you're picking up this massive client. You're like, you're having a conversation. But here's one thing I have like a really good read on people. First minute, I'm like, this is an incredible introduction. Thank you, Brian Wish. And I just love hearing people's stories. I loved your vision. I loved how big you think. But one of the things that I love most about you is how articulate you are with what you're doing and how you can inspire others. So the bar is set, my friends.
Yeah, I love it.
Pressure.
I love it. I listen, Caleb, that was on the other end of that phone call I think it was a Zoom call that we did. It was a little bit more stressful than I probably put off, but I do, because then I think I ended at the pickleball place where I was challenging my very competitive, also pro athlete wife in a game of pickleball. And which is a great kind of reflection of the life. It was 3-4 years ago, I had a vision for myself that it was actually really around kiteboarding, but put in any sport that gives you fuel. But it was this idea that I was kiteboarding and I would come back and my two daughters who are 10 and 12 are kind of playing on the beach and my wife's hanging out. And then I go into the house and like I'm grilling, and in between everything, I'm juggling business calls with different businesses. And it was this, a great reflection of this blurred line between both my work life and my home life, but also this place where passion, purpose, and professional overlap. And, since we last talked, Caleb, I mean, my superpower, right? My greatest gift is understanding people and then helping really uncover people's dreams and being the catalyst to then help them pursue those things. And that's what essentially Save Your Asks, my latest book, is really written around, which is, that more of us need to be ruthlessly pursuing our passions, whether that be through a side hustle, through a nonprofit, or through just learning something that we've always wanted to learn. And so many people give up on those dreams at way too young of an age. And what I end up inheriting, Caleb, especially when I'm at these larger, keynotes that I'm the kind of main speaker or whatever, is these executives will pull me aside when no one else is around. And they're like, so Chris, don't tell my team this, but I have zero passions in my day-to-day job. And I'm living an authentic life. You really inspire me up there. Where do I start? And it's clean up on aisle 9 with these 55-year-old whatever executives. And what if I could get ahead of that, right? What if I could help inspire the next generations to really put the time in to understand themselves and build a life that they never thought could be done, right? And I mean, with my 12-year-old, she's a huge horseback rider. I'm married to a professional soccer player, right? Like we knew nothing about horseback riding nor the investment in it, right? And she just left to go to the horse farm. But can I tell a quick story?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, and this is where I get really fired up. So she's dyslexic. She's 12, and every single night since she was 5, we just spend time together hanging out, right as she's going to bed. And I mean, it's actually kind of a dependency now. She can't go to bed without me, but I'm like, well, I'll take this for as long as it will last. And sometimes we read, sometimes I'll, like last night I put an Apple TV show on, and I'm just kind of like, she's listening to some book on tape, whatever it is, right? But like, that's our time to connect, right? And I call it the moments in between. I actually just wrote a blog post on this, but it's really the moments in between everything in life, right? That actually are the most impactful. And so I'm trying to choreograph that into my day to day. And it was in one of these moments in between that I noticed she was stressed out and she had tears in her eyes. I knew she was kind of, hesitant about sharing with me. And I said, Finn, go for it. Like, what's going on? And, she was in school at the time, and she told me about all these pressures she was feeling, both socially as well as from, being dyslexic, trying to keep up. And I turned to her and I said, listen, I want to tell you a story about when I was your age and a little bit older. And I referenced, I can't bring my foot this high, but I referenced my first tattoo that I got when I was 18. And it's just like this little kind of, it's kind of embarrassing now, but it meant something at the time. And I explained to her how I always had this dream from really middle school all the way through high school that if worse came to worse, I could always start my own resort in the Caribbean. And it was this dream of, creating this place that I could just get away to and, surf or kiteboard or whatever it is. And I could just escape everything. And I said, Finley, like you too need that, right? And life being a ruthless pursuit of passions is the most important thing, but it's not going to be easy. And you're going to have to really, I call it hustle muscle. You got to build that hustle muscle. We talk a lot about that. And she kind of laughed a little bit, but then I said, what's that thing for you, right? What's your resort in the Caribbean, Finn? And I knew what was coming. And she said, well, Dad, I just want to ride horses. I want to have my own farm. And I said, okay, Finn, imagine a world where you're doing that all day, every day. And listen, like long division that you're so stressed about, keep asking Alexa that stuff because Alexa knows it, right? I'm not worried about that. Nor, I don't even care if you go to college, sweetie. Like it's not going to be easy, but you got to double down on that. And it was in that moment, Caleb, like people now are asking me and my whole, like everything, I'm touching a lot of different things and businesses and doing keynotes every week. Like, what's that next act? And my next act is I want to, at scale, help people as early as possible, really starting at age 13, identify where their passions and strengths lie, and then give them more of a choose your own adventure to go after that. It's all this stuff. Even you're so lucky, Caleb. Look at you. Like I watch your video clips on Instagram and I'm like, look at how passionate he is about this stuff, right? Like you can't really fake that. And if you were stuck at some corporation, you'd be faking it all day, every day, right? And so, yeah, ultimately, and I actually have some huge meetings coming up, which I can't really name names, but there's a group of very famous entrepreneurs that are redoing our educational systems. And they're actually starting their own school together in Austin. And so I'm having conversations to them of what this might look like if we were to create something. I don't know where that'll go.
It's funny, man. I have multiple people in my network that have talked about what you're saying about what's happening in Austin, and that just tells you the caliber of people that you're chatting with. I want to ask you a question.
That's my quick rant.
I want to point some things out. Number one, I'm going to ask you questions about how you find your passion. I'm going to ask you questions about strength finders and being like very clear about that, because how you parent is someday I'm hoping to parent that way. And I'm just like, it honestly brings me, it makes me very emotional, because I was that 12-year-old dyslexic kid who was super short and I had kind of a moment with my parents, especially my mom, where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to amount to anything and all of these things. And she said something very simple to me. She said, Caleb, the things that you can't control, don't worry about. Your identity doesn't come in. Like my parents did a great job helping me understand where my identity comes from, but the things that you can control, like let's put our identity in the effort that we're doing. A couple of things I just want to point out. Number one, I love what you're talking about with passion. I think something about the education system literally beats every living daylight out of passion.
So do our businesses, by the way.
Yeah, it just beats you down. But number two is like a lot of people don't even know how to even live that way. I remember working at the bank and thinking to myself, I refuse to live a life of regret. And it's so interesting to me because, and this is one thing I want to point out, your 12-year-old is saying these things, and like to her, it's a really stressful. And yet being 26, I say, man, 12 years old, there's nothing in the world that should, but I'm going to look back at 25, 26 years old, 20 years from now and say, why was I stressing out about what I'm stressing out about? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Totally.
Like, we will all die someday. Yeah. At the end of the day, I think it's so interesting that like wherever we are, time creates the most perspective. And it would be a shame for anybody watching this, for anybody listening to this, to not go for what your God-given talents and passions are. So I think we can all agree on that. The real question is, how do you find that? Because someone could say, Caleb, it's easy for you to say. Chris, it's easy for you to say. How in the world do you find that? I just dumped a whole bunch of things on.
Yeah.
I just love this conversation.
Let me address a couple of those.
Yeah.
And listen, you and I are cut from the same cloth. I just turned 42. I'm a little bit further in the journey, but I mean, listen, like, and I don't want anyone listening to be like, Chris has it all. I'm figuring this stuff out, right? Like, I've gone through a week of being really scared, right? And I look at the life I've been able to create, and horses are really expensive, and you think I'm kidding, but like, it really is. Like, it's gotten out of control, and that was really what was the catalyst to me freaking out and going in this tailspin. I'm coming out of it, but like, I don't think that goes away, but it's also what drives me. And my wife reminds me of that. Like, that's what drives you. You kind of like it and thrive off of it. And I was like, yeah, you're kind of right. But so I don't want anyone listening to think like, I've got it figured out, right? Like, the last thing I want to be is like just a social media influencer or someone that's just trying to get rich off of others. I want to change the world. And I finally, for the first time ever, feel like I can do it. And I'm starting to do it with some of these relationships and being that catalyst for others. And so here's the thing that I run up against a lot, right? Is that especially more traditional corporations where I'm going in, sometimes I'll be even told I'm not allowed to talk about side hustles. And I'll say, all right, then I can't talk to you. So sorry. And the other thing is that as we start to talk about these things, right, these things that drive us as individuals, there is a pushback, more specifically and on the generational side, from boomers and Xers, older Xers, that life can't be a ruthless pursuit of passions. And, I wrote, my first book was all about generational differences in leadership. And if I were to tell you the biggest takeaway I have from that whole journey is that the younger you get generationally, the more of an expectation that passions will exist within whatever job you're going to take. And there's an expectation of that. And what's happening is younger people are getting into these corporations and they're like, this sucks. Like, nothing that I was excited about is actually happening here. So I'm just going to leave and do it on my own. I mean, look at your journey. I'm sure it would kind of reflect a story arc that looks something like that. And so the other thing that I hit here a lot, so I say to everyone and these corporate leaders, I'm like, hey, it's up to you guys to support your people's side hustles, encourage it. Because the role of you as a boss isn't just to tell people what to do, it's to be a mentor and a coach. So help uncover not only the passions of those people, but purpose statements and other pieces, and then create a tangible roadmap for them to achieve those in their day-to-day, whether that be working with a different part of the organization, whether it be supporting a nonprofit, or helping them launch a side hustle that is not in direct competition with whatever your company does. And then I get this, Caleb. So that's one thing, right? You got to overcome that. And it's like, well, what about the people that are passionate about something they suck at? And I don't know if I've told you this story, but I went to London in my sophomore year of college. I went to Vanderbilt, but I went through NYU. And going through NYU, I befriended two guys there, right? Like, it was a very different environment than what I was used to at Vanderbilt. And I was in London to really figure out why my British father didn't like to hug me, essentially. I was like, if I go there, maybe I'll figure out what drives my dad. And I quickly figured it out, right? So there was two guys I was hanging out with a lot, and each one of them had very distinct passions. And one of them, his name's Micah Lasher. He's actually pretty big in politics. And he was very passionate about magic. And not only was he passionate about magic, but he, at age 12, was taken into David Copperfield's like small group of whatever, right? He had published, he was one of the youngest authors. And when we went to bars in London, there would be lines of people to watch Micah perform. It was crazy, right? And he was kind of born to be a magician, right? And he honed that skill, especially it was, meeting people in London. It was one of the best things that we got to bring people to us, because I can tell you our hitting on girls was not very honed at that time. And so Micah the magician would come in. Now, for the other guy in our group, his passion, when he told me, I was kind of taken aback, because he said, I'm super, super passionate about comedy. And I turned to him and I said, interesting, because you're not a very funny guy, right? But listen, dude, like, we're in London. Like, I say go for it, right? Go for it. When else are you going to be in London? They have open mic nights all over the place. And it was only until towards the end of the semester that he ended up doing one of these open mic nights. And it was exactly how you would imagine, Caleb. It was like that dark underground area underneath a pub, super smoky, 7 very, very British individuals, discerning and not smiling or laughing. And it was horrible when he did it. And it was actually afterwards that we, drank away. It was actually back when I drank. We all just ended up partying our faces off because it was so bad. Like it was the only thing to do. And so what's interesting about that is we then, ended up going back to, they went up back to New York. I went back to Atlanta, and it was about 3 years later, and we were all still in touch. Micah got into politics, and this other guy, he actually ended up getting into a similar field as I was in with social, I was in digital and social media, and he was in the Google world. And so we were in touch. And it was 3 years later, after being in touch here and there, he sent me a text and saying, Chris, I'm coming down to Atlanta or near Atlanta, and I'm playing at the Georgia Theater. And I was like, are you a musician now? He's like, no, I'm a comedian. I was like, what? Like do you remember that night? Do you remember how horrible that was? You're the least funny dude in the world. How are you doing comedy? He was like, Chris, every single day since we left London, I've been practicing comedy. And you know what? I'm actually pretty funny. And I went out and saw him, and you know what? He was actually pretty funny. And that was the story of Aziz Ansari, who then went on to create Parks and Rec. He's now, I think, touring with Bill Murray. And I got to see this guy that ruthlessly pursued his passions, or what anyone would call the 10,000 hour rule. And the truth of the matter is this, that most people just give up before they can get it. And we live in a society where instant gratification, and there's a variety of reasons why that is, like the guys sitting on Lambos waving $100 bills that get rich quick, our own impatience, as well as how scary it is. That's what's getting in the way. And I think if more people, no matter what your age is, doubled down and went after those passions, we'd not only be a lot more successful, but I think we'd all be a lot happier. And that to me, right, my ultimate goal, why I was put on this earth, is to unlock people's dreams and then be the catalyst, then go after it. And that's it. And so anyone who has a passion that's outside of the thing that they were quote unquote born to do, screw that. Just keep going.
Dude, appreciate what you're articulating. And now I'm going to get practical.
Yeah,
tactical.
I love it. Let's do it.
Passion. I would not be doing my job well as someone interviewing if I didn't lean in to say, okay, talk to me about how you find your passion.
Yes.
Talk to me and how it can be practical. Because this is what I'll say. I got very blessed, I'll say, to have my passions in a field that I can do quite well in. Okay. Mm-hmm. I'm passionate about helping people with money, and that the world will compensate me greatly for that. Okay. I also think our generation, while we understand experiences are greater than, living a miserable life, sometimes there's a value proposition, entitlement, drop off, where it's like, well, I deserve X, Y, or Z. And I'm a big fan of, like, I might be young, but it's like supply and demand, buddy. Like your services or products are not perceived as valuable. I'm not saying you're not valuable. What you're bringing to the marketplace is not valuable. That's the perception. Mm-hmm. All that to say, I'm very passionate about this because I want to help you be the catalyst that you were meant to be. Because at the end of the day, people living a more passionate life will make the world a better place. How does that get practical? And I touched on both ends. How do you find your passion? But then how do you make sure that passion can be translated into value? And maybe I'm the sucker that thinks it needs to be valuable. But if passion can ultimately translate to value creation, it's you're set for life.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I would say is, one, the riches are in the niches, right? So with the riches being in the niches, it doesn't matter how nuanced your passion is. There's millions of dollars if you go after it. And I actually have a handful of examples in my book, but I went to a guy named Vincent Puglisi, and Vincent wrote a book basically, and it's called Freelance to Freedom. And I went to Vincent. I was like, dude, I need some good examples of crazy nuanced passions of people making over $1 million a year. Can you give me them? He was like, Chris, where do you want to start? Right. And so he told me one story of this yogi who she found that yoga was the most instrumental pieces in her pregnancy with her daughter, and got super passionate about it, and decided that her nuanced passion that she was going to go after was to teach other yogis how to do yoga for pregnant women and create a train the trainer system. That this yogi is now making over $1 million a year teaching pregnant yogis how to do yoga. Right. And I've got a handful of other examples of that. So the riches are in the niches. It's just having I think, perseverance and the wherewithal to find where those things exist and be maniacally focused in order to see that through. So that's one side of it. Right. The other side of it is the exercise that I will use when I'm speaking specifically, to these more 45 plus year old execs, that they're like, hey, Chris, like, how do I even identify my passions? I don't even know. Like, I like golf. I do that on the weekend. And I'm like, all right, so here's the exercise. Ready? So tactics. So here's the exercise. And it's called the Google Me exercise. And why it's the Google Me exercise is that if you, Caleb, were a search engine, what is it that everyone is going to you for advice around? What are they typing into that Google search bar that is the Caleb search bar, right? So for me, it's big green egg recipes, or even how to put together a big green egg. It's how to learn how to kiteboard. It's building businesses out of books that scale. It's being the father of young daughters. It's crazy cool places to go and escape in the Caribbean that you never would have heard of. It's at least 30 of these nuanced things that not only do people come to me for advice for, but I get fired up to actually talk about it. So that's the first exercise. So come up with 30 of those. And then it's the exercise of, now, which of these things should I incubate or pursue? And if I said, out of that whole list, what do you have enough passion, excitement, and tenacity around that if I said, you've got to write one book on one of those things, choose the subject, which is it going to be? And go write that book. And if you need help, I have a nonfiction book planner, and I send that to people. And this is what happens in these meetings. And these executives are like, holy crap, Chris, I never thought. And now, so I'm being a catalyst to their dreams by holding them accountable with a nonfiction book planner if it's a super nuanced passion, right? That they never thought would have been able to pursue. And so that, to me, is tactically one of my favorite exercises for people listening to go after. And if you can't even do that, then it's time for exploration, right? It's time to start dabbling in many other things. Get out of your friend group and go explore, right? Go travel and go have the real conversations. I'm actually about to post a blog post, and it's the most important question you can ask anyone when they're sitting across from you. And that most important question is, what's your dream? What fires you up? And when you do that, that's where bonds are forged for life, and where anything can happen, and I now do it. My daughters will not go even to Publix with me, because if I feel the energy, seriously, right? If I'm feeling the energy of that person just standing or whatever, I'm going to go there. And can I tell another story?
100%, dude. I'm enjoying this.
I tell this story. So right after I published Savior Asks in February, most authors will go do like a dumb speaking tour or whatever, right? And I'm not saying it's dumb. I learned off the first one that's an ego play. And I said, all right, I'm after we publish, I'm taking my family to Turks and Caicos, because that is the vision that I'm actually putting into play, where I can kiteboard and come back to the beach. My daughters are there, and then I'm kind of hopping on calls in between. That became a reality. And on that same day, I went to dinner, and everyone was exhausted. And it was like this little restaurant at our resort. And it was one of those days, I think we've always felt this, where it's like totally empty, and you've got these waiters and waitresses that are all dressed up, and you almost feel bad because no one else is there. And our waiter comes by. And young guy, biggest smile, and I could tell he was foreign. And his name was John Lee, and I just thought it was a cool name. And we start the conversation, and my daughters know where this is going. And they're like, oh, Dad, can we go play in the field next door? I'm like, yeah. And then my wife was actually pretty into it. And it was just like, once again, this good energy. And I learned from John Lee that he's the youngest of 11 kids. He's from Haiti. And he came to Turks and Caicos 5 years ago. And he did that to pursue his passion and dream in hospitality. And he has 3 jobs and is about to get his college degree from the local university in Turks. This is all uncovered through the meal, right? And he just comes back and he calls me Mr. Chris. Mr. Chris, like, this is so fun, blah, blah, blah. You got, like, I can't believe you're actually taking the time to talk to me. And I'm like, John Lee, this is amazing. Now I'm going to ask the question. And it was right around dessert. I said, you ready? He goes, yeah, I'm ready, Mr. Chris. And I go, John Lee, tell me what your dream is. You work so hard. You're so good at what you do. What is it that you want more than anything in the world? And he thought about it and he gets back to me. He goes, now, Mr. Chris, I have 2 answers. Okay. Is that okay? I was like, yeah, that's fine. He goes, number 1, I'm doing all these jobs to get back to Haiti. I haven't seen my family in 5 years. So that's my dream number 1. And my mom's a little bit sick, blah, 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 right? Like, so I want to get back to Haiti. And my dream number 2 is come to America and work in hospitality. That's my ultimate dream. And that, Mr. Chris, is my dream. And I then turned to my wife. I was like, that's awesome. Like, do you know how many people your age, he's 22, that they have no idea what their dream is? And he leaves the table and he goes, grabs our dessert. And I was like, Julia, I'm going to Aladdin this. Like, I got to grant wish number 1 so he can focus on 2. She was like, absolutely. So he comes back to the table. I go, John Lee, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to buy your ticket right now to go see your family in Haiti to grant wish number 2 so you can solely focus on that wish. So on that wish number 2 of going to America and working in hospitality. And I'm not going to just stop after this first wish. And he broke down into tears, and it was like this emotion that I didn't really expect, because I'm like, it's $450. Like, that's easy, right? But like, here he is busting, all day, every day to try to make that work. And I was able to take that out, right? So here's where it gets fun. And so it was about 3 weeks ago. It was 10:30 at night. We were about to put on Stranger Things or whatever, or we just finished. And my wife was like, Chris, who are you texting at 10:30? Because I don't really, I've kind of on and off switch. I was like, John Lee. She's like, Chris, you're still talking to him? I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to get a visa to bring him to Atlanta. We're bringing him to Atlanta. I think I've got this figured out. We're going to make wish number 2 come true. And I say all of that, Caleb, because that is what I want to do, that at scale, right? Like that is what I was put on this earth to do, and why I'm now really almost willing to sacrifice anything to get there. And so one of the most important things that as people are going out there, remember, like, go there, right? What's your dream? What fires you up? Why do we not go there in conversation? Right? And when you start going there, amazing things happen, right? So
many things. I want to connect some dots that you said
Sure.
like a while ago about the search engine. I love that. I've never actually heard anyone else speak about that. Is that original to you from a standpoint of like an exercise?
I don't know. I kind of made it up when I was writing the book, so maybe.
It's brilliant. Here's why. You tap into your passion, but you also tap into servicing others. Because I believe, and this could be wrong, but I believe ultimately passion dies out if you're not giving to other people. And so passion, on whether it's more gasoline or it's emphasized greater when you can be of service to other people. And so it's like you are the number 1 beneficiary when you're helping other people find 100%. Their dreams. The other thing that I've just realized, and this is why we get along so well, is from a very young age, I would ask people hard questions. Mm-hmm. And number 1, no one's ever asking. And number 2, I believe change happens with questions. And so I want to thank you, number 1, but I want to challenge the people that are watching this and listening to this. Yes, we're challenging you to find your dreams, but maybe you got to ask 3 people that you know, and you already know who those 3 people are. What are their dreams? Because relationships will get deeper and opportunities will open that you don't even know is possible, because you're going out there, you're putting yourself out there, and asking that question. And so a couple things I just wanted to highlight because I'm inspired, man. And I'm just so grateful for the way that you articulate and share what is so important. And unfortunately, people are living to a fraction of it.
Yeah. And one thing I'll acknowledge is the awkwardness that it can sometimes feel, right? And that's a muscle that you build, right? And it's actually through time that you get that kind of discerning. I can figure it out in the first 30 seconds. And one of the things that I get challenged on in that kind of area is, one, what happens if you get stuck in what I call a race to the middle, which is how fast you can find a common passion point with you and that other person. You don't go straight into what's your dream. People are gonna be like, what the hell's wrong with this person? Right? Like, what? Nah, I just met you, right? First, you got to find that common passion point, a race to the middle. And once you get there, that's where you take it to the next level. And I will throw the ball against the wall twice. And if it comes back and hits me in the face and I don't feel it, I move on to the next conversation. And so I don't even, if it doesn't work, then, and people aren't willing to go deep, on to the next.
One thing that I've learned, I don't have any science to back this up, but I've realized that people will match your authenticity. So it's interesting. It's like, I don't want it to be all about me, but if you go in and straight up ask for the question, people are like, hold on, I don't know you. I don't know if I can trust you. What I've always found is I've tried to perfect the 2-minute summary that shares authenticity, shares that vision, but also shares that I do not have my life figured out. And this is the thing I'm struggling with. Dude, you opened when we first chatted about things that you're struggling with.
Yeah.
I didn't like, it wasn't from a standpoint of like, oh, like you're depressed. It's like, this is real life. And why do you think we have such a connection? We've only talked twice over virtual.
Yeah.
We have a better connection that some people have over 30-year relationships. So it's one of those things where people will match your authenticity and energy. And so make sure, like, questions are really important. Make sure it's not a 30 minutes about me. But sometimes going straight in for the question could be ineffective.
So I have a quote that actually is right in line with that. And it's curiosity is the difference between connecting and networking. And because networking is transactional in nature, right? Connecting that's where the magic happens. And I've got a lot of fun stories that I can share that are in line with kind of what's inspired that, and where this epiphanal thing that's happened to me in the last, probably one of the greatest of my life in the last 6 weeks has happened. But it's somehow, by the way, my cat was able to open the door to this cottage and just walked in, and I have no idea how he did that.
I love it. So many other things that we could say, man. Why don't we take a step back? What's the kitty's name?
It's Scout.
Scout, love it. That's gonna be the thumbnail, okay?
Oh God.
All right, so let's take a step back.
Yes.
You read 2 books. You keynote. You coach. You're gonna run a future retreat center that's gonna be epic. How do we take a step back? How does my audience take the next step with you?
Yeah.
And where are you headed? I know that you've stated your dream, but where are you headed the next 1 to 3 years, and how can we be a part of the rocket ship?
Yeah. So the best place to connect with me is actually on Instagram, and that's at Tuff, TUFF22. And I'm very responsive if anyone has specific questions or whatever, like that's the best place. Or on LinkedIn, I've got a lot better at LinkedIn, and that's /Christopher Tuff. And just to learn more and kind of see what I'm all about and where it is that I'm speaking or whatever, go to christuff.me is my website. So that's kind of the best places to connect. And then where it is that I'm heading is, my main thing will be doing speeches over the, one a week all over the place. And the next year, I think that'll end up evolving. But the key for me is to really hit as many people as I can through my keynotes, which for Savior Asks, the title of that one is Am I an Asshole? And it's just, that to me is really where I am going to be able to really, I think, impact its scale within certain organizations. So, for anyone listening that has a group or an organization or whatever that's looking to look at life a little bit differently, but, to help really supercharge your sales teams, that's what I'm doing. And, once again, I'm working with amazing organizations, Nike. I'm actually speaking at Harvard again on August 18th. So it's starting to happen. July, once again, like taking me to like my current state, like July, no one works in July. And here I am, like I've got 2 daughters, 2 horses, 2 bunnies, cat, a dog, a wife, all to support. And I'm like, nothing's happening. Like, what's going to happen? Like, how am I going to make ends meet? Whatever. And it's all going to work out. But yeah, nothing happens in July. So I've been kind of in a state of figuring out, all right, where is it that I want to be going? And what is ultimately my own purpose and positioning? And then where is it that I want to be focusing my time and efforts? So yeah, it's been actually probably one of the most important parts, but I hate that side, right? I hate sitting by myself and like putting words on paper. I like doing this. Yeah. And, and for anyone listening that's struggling with pursuing their passions, this is a piece of advice that might be helpful, is find a partner to do it with, because it creates an account. That's what I do with anything that I get my hands in. I find a partner for it. And some more sophisticated entrepreneurs will like look at me and they're like, Chris, you give away equity way too early, or you give away. I'm like, nope, that's the only way this thing's going to become a reality, is I need someone else to do it with me. I'm also an identical twin, married to an identical twin. That might be something to do with it. And probably the biggest extrovert to ever live. So, for those that are struggling to pursue their passions, or they have this idea, go find someone that helps complement your strengths. And we can get into some of my favorite tools and other pieces, but yeah, so that one to me is find a partner, right? Yeah. Find a partner and bring them in on it, and then see where it goes.
What I always do is I talk to like my 80-year-old self if I ever feel like scared, because I know it's like, hey, listen, I will die someday. And I will look back on the time that we have with maybe more energy than I will have at 80. I'm not sure. I have a lot of energy now. I'm hoping to have a lot of energy at 80. But I just it puts it in perspective to be like, man, like I've potentially lived 1/4 of my life or more. And it goes fast, but it creates perspective. And it's like, I don't want to procrastinate on
Dude,
the
you're
amazing
26.
life.
You're fine. I'm the one dying over here. I'm 42.
Dude, that's the kind of perspective that is always good, and that's what I do whenever I feel like fear or scared, or when I have a lot of ego. That is the exercise that I do that keeps a lot of that in check. You've written 2 phenomenal books. Do you want to give a quick overview on each one of them? I'm gonna have links below, and then if there's anything else that you want to give, like, go for it. Man, this has been time.
I'm gonna end on one story. How about that?
Sounds good.
But yeah, my books are The Millennial Whisperer, and then that was published, I don't know, 4 years ago.
2019.
Yeah, 2019. Crazy. And that's all really it's all about connection, genuine connection, but genuine connection inward to your people. And that millennials and Gen Zers aren't the problem. They just expose a lot of the problems. And so I work with companies around their culture, how to better retain and attract talent. And build cultures that truly scale and thrive. And then Save Your Asks is my most recent book, and that is genuine connection outward, right? So how can you become a better salesperson? And even if you're not a salesperson, how do you do that? Whilst also giving people what I think they all desire, which is this idea that we all need to be pursuing passions in some domain and cultivating, because actually we'd be more effective as a salesperson if we did that. So those are the books. Buy them on Amazon. If people can't afford it, whatever, I'll send you the PDF, whatever. Books are, for me, it's just a way to scale impact.
And I will say this, if you do buy the books, please take 2 minutes and review them on Amazon. It really helps across the board get more people exposed to this message.
It's what's funny, Caleb, is people were like, Chris, how come you only have like 30 something reviews of Save Your Asks? Because I'm like, because I save my asks with everyone. I don't ask anyone to rate or review it or buy it, right? Because I've got to practice what I preach, even in the beginning of Save Your Asks, where most people will put their endorsements, like all my like famous or people names that people would recognize. I say, like, you got to take my word for it. I didn't get any endorsements from my famous friends because I needed to save those asks, right? Just practice what you preach. So can I end with one story?
Yeah, 100%.
So everyone listening lives somewhere on the ask continuum. All right. Now, if asks come really easy to you, you are most likely an ask hole, right? And so you've got to move more towards this place of creating genuine connection. If you're more like me, and Caleb, I have a feeling you're a little bit more like this, you're on the other side of that same spectrum where you will let the ask pass you by. It's that moment where you should ask, but you don't because you feel bad, right? And so my favorite tactic, specifically for those people that are on that other side of the ask continuum, that let the ask pass them by, is going back to dreams, right? Is what I call masking your ask in your dream. All right. And it looks something like this. It was actually in the interviewing with some of the world's best networkers that I came across a guy, family friends of mine, that his name's Jason Trotwine, incredible entrepreneur, a beautiful mind, came from the veterinary world, had very, very, very successful. And we were connecting. He was, he had hair down to his shoulders. He was at his house in Hawaii, and he was introduced to me as a guy that rents out Kelly Slater's wave pool. I'm like, hell yeah, I want to meet this dude. And we hit it off right on this Zoom call. And it was coming towards the end of the call, and I'm looking at kind of who it is that I'm going to be interviewing. I was like, I need more people to interview. So, Jason, I'm going to practice my favorite tactic with you. Are you ready? Like, people come to you all the time for favors, right? So tell me if this works. He goes, yeah, bring it on, Chris. I go, okay, it's called masking your ask in your dream. And I'm telling you, Jason, you probably have learned this about me, but my dream is to create a handbook, whether you just graduated from college or you're some 50-year-old sales exec that just feels stuck. I want to help all of those people become better salespeople and networkers, but also in the process, live a more fulfilling life. Who in your network do I have to interview? And immediately he goes, Chris, you got to interview Raymana. Do you know who Raymana is? I was like, I think so. Tell me more. He goes, well, Raymana is Kelly Slater's right hand at Surf Ranch, right? It's this man-made wave pool in the middle of California. And it's actually Raymana that helps everyone get up on that wave. And it was 7 minutes into our relationship. I was about to paddle into the first wave there. And he was on the jet ski next to me, and he looks over to me. He puts his hand on my heart. He looks into my eyes and he says, I love you, brother. Now just breathe, just breathe. And then I caught the most epic barrel of my life. And ever since that moment, Chris, Raymana and I have a bond that is forged. And, now here we are 8 years later. I'm going to send him a text message and tell him to FaceTime you. And I was like, awesome. And by the way, I know of Raymana. I follow Kelly Slater. Like, I've seen him. Like, he's pretty massively influential in the surfing world. Anyways, 24 hours later, I get a FaceTime from Raymana, and I can see him. He's in Tahiti. We're all stuck in our houses at the height of COVID. And I'm like, he comes on with a big smile. And Raymana, he has gray hair. He's not like your typical pro surfer. He's a big dude, right? And he's like, brother man, what's going on? I'm like, oh my God, this guy is the best. All right, Raymana, it looks like you're in Tahiti. I'm stuck in my house in Atlanta. Like, tell me, I want to live vicariously through you. Tell me about your day. He's like, brother man, I just got off Sergey Brin's yacht, and I was teaching his wife how to surf. Wonderful lady, actually pretty good surfer. Now here I am with you. I was like, Raymana, you truly are the greatest connector of billionaires and whatever people. Like, that's amazing. Now, tell me about this bond you have with Jason, because he talks about this moment where you were on the jet ski at Surf Ranch and you put your hand on his heart. You looked at his eyes. You said, I love you, brother. Breathe. Like, tell me about that. He goes, yes. Now, don't tell Jason this, but I tell that to everyone when I'm teaching them how to surf at Surf Ranch. And I mean two things by it. One, take in this wave. It's going to be one of the most epic waves of your life. Two, this might be the most epic wave of your life that you miss. And I want you to actually leave with a smile on your face. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Now, here's where it gets interesting, right? So I said, Raymana, we've hit it off. Jason and I have hit it off. I am going to surf at Surf Ranch with you. And by the way, if anyone listening, like Surf Ranch, it is the most impossible ticket. It's like playing Augusta National, right? For anyone that's a golfer. And so I said, I'm going to Surf Ranch with you. And it was 6 weeks ago, Caleb, that I get a call from Jason. And Jason, mind you, we will text here and there, but our only interactions has been via me interviewing him on this Zoom 2 years ago, 3 years ago when I started writing Savior Asks. And he goes, all right, Chris, guess what? I was like, what? He goes, in 2 weeks, you're going to come to Surf Ranch and it's a fundraiser for my friend Grant Corrigan. And you're coming, baby. And you're going to surf that wave. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, this is going to happen. And I fly out to Surf Ranch and I totally botch my first wave. All right. And you only get 2 waves in an hour and really 6 waves, clean waves, where you get the whole thing to yourself the whole time you're there for 36 hours. So I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I'm done for. Like, I'm going to go back having just totally botched everything, blah, 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 right? And so I get in there for my second wave, the final wave of the night. And I get up and I start the turn and I hear this familiar voice. Get low, now turn and turn. I'm like, Raymana is there next to me on the wave. I catch the most epic barrel. I have tears coming down my face. And the rest of the whole 2 day or 36 hours kind of fell in line with that. And I was hanging out with Kelly Slater's team and really getting to know this guy, Grant Corrigan, who's by far the most inspirational person I've ever met. He was paralyzed at age 30 in a snowmobile accident, pushed himself across all of the South Pole. And then he's now the only paraplegic with his pilot's license. I'm like, so all this stuff is happening. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it, right? This is it. This is that stoke. This is that moment. This is what I'm trying to inspire for everyone to go after. Because if you can dream it and you put it out there, it will become a reality. It's not also manifesting it. You make it happen, right? Like, that whole thing was choreographed because I never stopped actually executing in the pursuit of that dream. And so hopefully people can find inspiration from that. But, how I use Raymana in my keynote is that we all need to be actually a lot more like Raymana and a lot like Ask Holes, right? If we could actually double down on that thing that we are passionate about, which in Raymana's case is surfing and teaching people to get up on this wave, and he can get anyone up on that wave. And here he is, he's on a first name basis with the who's who in the world, right? And so what if we could all actually just be a little bit more like Raymana and less like the asshole that we're all being trained to be? That would be awesome.
Chris, I appreciate you a ton, and thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for giving it your all. And I can't wait to see what the future holds, man. I think there's going to be a lot of people that get unlocked thanks to you. And I'm pumped to see it happen and be in the trenches with you. So I will have links below to all the things that you have mentioned. My last question for you is, if this is your last day on this earth and you were with your 2 daughters and wife and you couldn't give them any of your books, any interview, you only had one last conversation with them, what are you going to make sure to highlight in that conversation?
I mean, it would be go for it, right? And, everything that I've done up until this moment has been around teaching you your hustle muscle and, that tenacity and resilience. But if you have enough of a passion for it, just go for it. But don't give up, right? You got to keep bouncing back and do not let people tell you it's impossible. And that, I love them, and, that they need to be ruthlessly pursuing their passions. And, I kind of live every day like that, to be honest. Right. And so, it's interesting. So this tattoo, It says, everywhere I go, this is my last story, but with my 12-year-old, ever since she was 5, the last thing I say to her is, do you feel my love? And she says, everywhere I go. And so I got her a necklace with 2 little bars of that. And, that's the bond that I know that when I'm gone, like, that's what they're going to roam with. And, I'm putting 100% in. I'm not always 100, like, I screw up, right? Like, and I get distracted by my phone. And, I'm not saying I'm the best parent, but I'm having those conversations, those moments in between. Some people call it garbage time. But how can we actually choreograph more of those into our life, both with our kids and our friends and our family? So,
yes, man.
Yeah.
Best is yet to come. Appreciate you.
Yes, I love it.
I want to thank you for watching till the end. If you enjoy our content, please like, share, subscribe. It helps other people find our channel, and we really, really appreciate it. I also want to let you know that we have this thing called the Better Wealth Efficiency Quiz, and our goal is to give you a wealth efficiency score in less than 3 minutes, and really highlight and get you to start thinking about the potential inefficiencies that you have in your life. So if you haven't taken the quiz, go check out, it'll be the link below. Check that link out, take the quiz, and then let us know your score.